Welcome to the Hire Truckers Podcast, where we interview experts in driver recruiting. We provide industry insights, marketing trends, and motivation to help you level up your recruiting game.
Welcome to the Hire Truckers Podcast. I'm your host, Ginger Craddock. So how do you go from a family vacation in the Outer Banks to shaping national trucking policy on Capitol Hill? Well, for Hailey Betham, that road was paved with hazmat conversations over dinner and a deep family connection to the trucking industry, and a well-timed call from the Truckload Carriers Association. Today on the Hire Truckers Podcast, we're pulling back the curtain on what it really takes to advocate for truckers in Washington, from major legislation and DOT rules to the human stories that fuel the fight. So let's hit the road with today's guest, Hailey Betham, Manager of Government Affairs at the Truckload Carriers Association. So Hailey, welcome.
How's it going?
Great. I can't wait for everyone to hear your story. And so let's start with, how did you end up in the middle of trucking policy at the Truckload Carriers Association?
Yeah, I put an application to TCA, and knowing that my husband's side of the family has some deep trucking roots. My father-in-law works in the transportation industry. His grandfather was a manufacturer for motor carriers. And then my mother-in-law's family had a carrier themselves in Elk Ridge, Maryland. They sold it in 1986. So randomly enough, I heard of it. I heard trucking when family was over, and I had a phone call from TCA, and I was at the beach with my husband's side of the family, and I said, "Hey, I'm interviewing for a trucking association for government affairs," and they just said, "Okay, when's the interview?" I'm like, "Next Monday." And outside of my father-in-law, my husband's aunt, she oversees underwriting for an insurance company, and I had ended up having like a book full of notes for my interview, all provided by my family. And, my boss brings it up sometimes still, for those who might know him, Mr. Dave Heller. He said, "You had all of these notes, and I was kind of surprised with your questions, because how would you know that?" And then, here we are. And, it turns into, I actually loved the trucking policy. Rather, that's me talking to my family about trucking, or, the members of TCA. We happen to share a great friend, Tracy Rushing. It's always nice being able to talk trucking, and yourself, Ginger. So it's just the opportunities keep going. And, it's really fun talking trucking on Capitol Hill. So I really did fall in love with what trucking represents and the importance of it, and, connecting with my husband's side, connecting with their members. And you guys are, more so the trucking industry, you yourself are just so welcoming. So it's a great fit, and here I am.
I love that story. And so I love that your family, that this is the thing that I know about being in trucking. People who are in trucking are passionate about trucking and passionate about what they do. And you also touched on the other piece, welcoming. I mean,
Yes.
My background, I've been in education, I've been in banking, I'm an entrepreneur. I came to trucking, and it's like I found my tribe, I found my people. The innovation, the mindset, the service orientation, the welcoming nature, all of those things I found in trucking, and just the most satisfying career path, just builds upon everything I've done in the past. And I hear that in your story as well. So what type of freight you said your mother-in-law, they actually had a company that they sold, a trucking company they sold in the 80s. Do you happen to know what type of freight they hauled?
They were refrigerated.
Oh, so they were refrigerated. Wow.
Yeah.
And so we know from being in the industry, not all freight is created equal, and just the expertise that our drivers have to know in handling that freight is just, it's mind-blowing what a driver has to know. And I'm excited to pull that curtain back a little bit today and help our audience kind of put themselves in the seat of the driver, why the policies and the things that you're working on are so important on Capitol Hill. We can improve things for fleets and for drivers. So Hailey, when you're talking to lawmakers, what's the one thing about trucking that you always try to help them understand?
The one thing, and I think we had actually a meeting today, and the one thing that you always want to remind someone is that everything comes off of a truck. You go to the grocery store, it probably came off of a truck. You ordered something from Amazon Prime, it came off of a truck. And, you think about it, you think of COVID, and you think of the need and urgency that people may need for just goods in general. COVID really put the trucking industry up on a pedestal, knowing that it's so important. So, for us, it's even if, we go in the meeting with maybe a younger staffer who might be 22, 23 years old, this is their first job or they're an intern, it's everything comes off of a truck. Everything that you buy comes off of a truck. So just making sure that they know that and they understand it. It's the easiest connection. Everyone goes to the grocery store, everyone's going to Target, or everyone's going and using Amazon Prime. So everything comes off of a truck.
Yes. And since COVID, there's so many things that I would go to brick and mortar for that once COVID was over, my shopping patterns had changed. I only do curbside pick up at the grocery store now. Rarely do I go to a brick and mortar store. And so just seeing that from my point of view and how things change for me, so I can see that connection point. Everything comes on a truck. I love that. So now let's pivot to policy, Hailey. So the transportation reauthorization bill, what's coming down the pipeline with that? Can you break that down for us? What's at stake for carriers and for drivers?
So this is, each administration will have their sort of, more so new Congress will come and have a new set of, it's more so like that funding. What's the important topics? What dollars are we utilizing for the industry, whether that be trucking? It goes under such a huge window. So think your infrastructure, think trucking, think rail, all of these things. It's in one big bill for funding for the next couple of years. So it actually expires next September in 2026. The current one under the Biden administration, also known as the IIJA. So right now, the House of Representatives early this year were like, hey, industries, trucking industries, rail, you name it. What is the issues that what are the issues? Let me say it like that. What are the issues that you would like to see be solved? What dollars would you like to see for what's important to you, essentially, to have in that bill, this lovely bill? Senate, we just had a meeting on the Senate side today, and they're asking for our priorities. And, Ginger, I know I can go more into depth about these priorities, but think truck parking, think hair follicle testing. For TCA, we're big advocates for keeping the federal weight limits the same at 80,000 pounds. So these are the priorities that we talk about. And for carriers across the country, we're trying to advocate for what's best for their business. I think truck weight being the one on the top of my head is, we don't want increase of weight. We think it's a safety issue. It's also, you think if there's increased truck weight, then insurance rates will go up. Or we already have carriers who already specialize in heavy haul. So, they took the time, money, and effort to sit there and train their drivers, right? So all of these different priorities will be in this bill, or whatever we can with the dollar amount that we see fit. And it's, the dollars that they will spend for transportation infrastructure projects in next couple of years. So right now it's like we're at the height of it, just trying to get all these priorities in and see where. I think they're saying that the draft will be later this fall. So I can always tune back in and give another update.
I like that. So the time is coming quickly down the pipeline to have all of that finalized and get that approved in the next bill. So you talked about truck weight limits. That makes sense. And the way that you unpack that, there's already heavy haul, but we don't want the weight load increased for everybody out there. It just, to your point, is a safety hazard. So Walk me through another hot topic that you mentioned was the hair follicle testing that TCA has been vocal about. Walk us through why that matters to fleets and how it could change hiring practices.
Yeah, so going back to the next reauthorization bill, we're heavily talking hair follicle testing. So there's a few carriers out there that hair follicle test instead of urinalysis test, right? The unfortunate part of hair follicle testing is that carriers cannot submit those positive tests in the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. So I can give you a great example. There's a carrier who hair follicle tests, and a driver comes in and they test positive, right? And he doesn't get that job at that carrier, but that carrier can walk down the street or go to another company who doesn't hair follicle test and easily get the job with that carrier because that positive result is not in the clearinghouse. So no one can track that they tested positive. And now this gentleman or woman is on the road driving a truck. And, for carriers, it's kind of that safety aspect to it, right? You don't want someone who's tested positive for whether that be marijuana, cocaine, meth, even opiates. That all comes through the hair follicle testing. And it's good to know on a carrier's perspective if that driver that they're hiring passed or failed, right? So in 2015, there was the FAST Act that would allow HHS and FMCSA to come up and allow driver or carriers to put those tests in, but it's been 10 years and it never happened. So that's why it's such a, we're just waiting. The industry is waiting. Even if a carrier doesn't hair follicle test, knowing that there's they might have hired someone. Hair follicle testing, which is with its efficiency, is very, very interesting. Urinalysis test that can see drugs from 1 to 2 weeks. Hair follicle testing is 3 to 6 months. So it's a longer history, and it's not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mind blown.
So it's not just everyone. I mean, what I'm hearing on Capitol is, it's marijuana, and it's like, well, think about. What is it? Cocaine, for example. You could find a hair follicle testing is 23 times more likely to show up for a hair test than a urinalysis test. We don't want to hire folks who do that on the side. So it's one of those things that we're seeing, and carriers, they want to know what their drivers are doing and making sure that they have someone safe from the road. And it's a liability as well, right? So that's really what's at stake when it comes to hair follicle testing.
That's incredible. And each of the things we've talked about so far have significant impact on public safety, driver safety, the bottom line of the fleets, because safe fleets increase, safe driving habits increase fleet bottom line because they're not having to pay out judgments and higher insurance rates, et cetera, et cetera. So this is key for everybody involved, the community, the driver, and the fleets. Another thing that you touched on, Hailey, is truck parking. We know that it continues to be a major pain point. And for those who don't know, for the number of trucks that are on the road, we have about 1 to 11 spaces available, one space for 11 drivers. And so 10 of those 11 drivers are not driving at night. So you think about how many drivers need space for safe parking at night. So walk us through, are you guys seeing traction in Washington related to truck parking? And what's realistic to expect in this next bill?
Yeah, so right now there's a few things going on Capitol Hill in terms of truck parking. Truck parking has been such a phenomenon to talk about on Capitol Hill. Everyone in terms of the committees that I talk to, the House Committee of Transportation Infrastructure specifically, right now, they are pulling it through with truck parking right now this year. Each Congress, we always have a bill called the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, which is introduced by Congressman Bost. And he's the truck parking champion. He is advocating for our drivers, and it's a very bipartisan bill, half Democrats, half Republicans. Everyone wants to get this across the finish line. even into the point where we were talking about another big bill, which is our tax bill, right, for the year of 2026. I believe it's the House Subcommittee for Transportation, Housing, Urban Development put $200 million for this year for truck parking, right? Now we have to see what the Senate's going to do, but the conversations are going, and we're always going to keep talking truck parking because drivers with ATRI have mentioned that it is the second most important issue for drivers that they face every day, right? So, we're trying to figure all of this out, and we're just trying to make sure that it happens. And carriers from TCA, carrier members are saying, like, we want truck parking for our drivers. Drivers, either they find a unsafe place to park, or they have the option to, they're against their hours of service, right? And you can't really do that. So it's either they find wherever they can or they go against that. And you mentioned something earlier, the trucking industry is so heavily regulated. So, thinking about truck parking, and I can talk about all the statistics about truck parking. I believe it's, a truck driver will lose an annual salary about $7,105 each year just looking for adequate truck parking. So, it hits home. Everyone will make sure that their drivers are safe, that people, families on the road are safe, driving on our nation's highways. So yeah, truck parking is where it's at. I know this year we're going to keep hitting it hard with our call in Washington this year, and our folks, get very passionate over it. And so am I. I think the industry deserves to have some safe truck parking, lighting, facilities, and let's see where it goes. I just am very excited to see if something happens.
Agreed. And you mentioned the TCA's call on Washington.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that. Is this an annual event? What do you guys do at this event? Walk us through that, please.
Yeah, so this is where many of your executives from all over the country, trucking companies, carriers, folks like yourself who have trucking cliques, right? They all come down and they talk trucking on Capitol Hill. Sometimes, meeting with their legislators and educating them and their office staff of what is so important about trucking, what topics they would like to see or support, and kind of have that opportunity. I like to say that they're telling trucking story, right? So you have carriers coming in and just telling legislators that day who represent them what's going on in the industry, right? So Call in Washington's an annual event. This year, always goes in hand with our fall business meetings, which is another kind of a legislative event. More is like, talking to, last year we had the person who oversees emissions for the EPA. So we're having those conversations of what can carriers expect and what's going to impact their fleets for fall business meeting. And the Call in Washington the next day is, hey, this is what we're hearing, and this is why we feel so passionate. So yeah, it's a really great event. We have great representation all over, Midwest, the South, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, Canada, even Seattle, Washington, the Northeast. So we always like to get a big group of people. And the other thing is, for folks, if you're from Canada and you're listening, we also do a Canadian embassy meeting so we can talk cross-border operations. So everyone's included and getting to talk trucking wherever they may be from. So it's really nice being able to facilitate that and make people feel so excited to talk trucking, right?
And I appreciate you including our Canadian audience. I actually talked to a Canadian-owned fleet this past week. And so there are some very unique needs there. And so I love that that's part of your annual event and just that collaboration there, because we are going back and forth across the border. And I really appreciate that. So as we're looking at specific policies, what's flying under the radar, but it could have big impact on fleet operations?
Yeah. So there's a lot of, I would say right now, it's actually starting to come to a head on Capitol Hill, but cargo theft and freight fraud is, so I would think, one topic right now that really just, it's a natural, like, it's like a phenomenon of how is this happening and how are folks finding ways to take freight and hiding it and, using it for their own personal business almost, right? Like, how does that make sense? So, I think cargo theft, started more so after the height of COVID spiking. We actually had a few members come in about a month ago and talk cargo theft and freight fraud. And, that's one that now is finally to get, ironically enough, we came and had these meetings to talk about our priorities, freight fraud. And all of a sudden, we're hearing that there's a Senate hearing that day while we're talking about cargo theft and fraud. So it's like, it feels like it was under the radar for the longest time and no one wanted to talk about it. If you had a handful of carriers and you said, who is dealing with cargo theft and fraud? No one wants to raise their hand in the room, but everyone's dealing with it, right? When we had these conversations on Capitol Hill, we were asking, I believe the bill from the last Congress was called Safeguarding Our Supply Chain Act, which would allow the Homeland Security and the FBI to have a task force to actually do something about it, because cargo theft and fraud, a lot of the times it's on local and state law enforcement. And say if that freight was in Florida and now that freight could be in Georgia, so who takes care of that stolen freight? Who's going to be in charge of that? So the FBI, we're asking for more local or more federal, I was to say that, more federal involvement, because there's not enough people to help figure this out. And it can be another liability issue. We have carriers who actually have created their own fraud department within their organization to combat it themselves. And we just want the answers, that's one of the things that we're trying to really hone down and figure out. But that's one, I think, such a big impact on operations. No one wants stolen goods or a stolen load. And how do you get those back, right? So that's one of the things that we're really thinking and looking at. And I think it's finally gotten to the point where Congress is finally acknowledging it. And it's been happening with the past couple of years.
Well, and I think the cargo theft and fraud is a nice connection point to the human side of policy. So you mentioned that the freight that your in-laws hauled back in the day was refrigerated freight. And I recently actually saw you at a safety summit, and that was also with a refrigerated carrier. And if I'm remembering correctly, and I need to fact check this, but is the number one freight that's stolen or near the top, is it refrigerated?
Food and beverage, yes. Like that's one of the top items that will be taken, stolen. Think of electronics as well, anything that you can really think of. But I know that's one of the top 3 items that will be taken pretty quickly.
Now let's take a minute to thank today's sponsor. Do you hire truck drivers in hard-to-fill areas, or do you need help creating efficiency in your recruiting department? You're not alone. With 50-plus years experience, Trucking Clicks specializes in data-driven strategies, industry-leading customer experience, and custom solutions that'll get you to your goal. Trucking Clicks is your go-to place for high-quality, direct leads at scale. Visit truckingclicks.com or call 512-982-0816 today.
And so when we think about the human impact, we've got the driver, we've got the fleet, we've got the end user, we've got the company that provided the goods and services. But then it's also a picture of what's going on in our culture, what's fueling that since COVID, the changes in the economy, things like that. And so when we think about the human side of trucking, is there a moment or a story from your work that reminds you why this kind of advocacy really matters? Something that sticks with you.
Yeah, so for those who may not be members of TCA, we actually do an award called the Professional Drivers of the Year, where we honor 5 drivers for their outstanding achievements within the industry as a truck driver, as a professional truck driver. And we always have them come to Call in Washington to tell their story about what they do. And I have yet to have a professional truck driver in my group for Call in Washington, and I want to make it happen this year. But I think the one thing that I remember, especially last year, is we had a few drivers just come up to me directly and saying, "Thank you so much for this opportunity, because I feel like I am able to make a connection and feel that I am being heard of what I am doing." And they just felt so proud of themselves to see that they're being seen, and Congress is like, "I understand you." And we were talking about truck parking. I know that was one of the issues that our professional drivers really wanted to talk about, and it just felt so good for that thank you, even for the opportunity. And they always we saw them, a few of them earlier this summer for TCA safety meeting, and they said, "Yeah, we're planning on coming back. We want to come back, and we'll pay for it. We'll pay for it ourselves. Like, we just want to come back." And Ginger, me and you have a really great friend, Tracy Rushing with Ari Garrison, right? And with the Safety Summit, and so she actually had a driver, Rose Rojo, who was a professional driver of the year a couple of years ago. I think it was 2 Call in Washingtons ago. And, Tracy says it herself, and she'll still talk about it. She's like, "I, as a carrier who represents Rose, I am so proud that she was able to, tell her story, make trucking known, and what it's like to be a driver, the long hours, to make sure that the supply chain keeps running." And as a carrier, you're just feeling proud. And, I think also on top of that, with these experiences, it's, as a carrier member, being able to have your driver and advocate for themselves also probably just feels so good. It's a reflective of your business, and, knowing that you're doing good, right? So it's not like a specific time, but just having those drivers come back to TCA and say, "Hey, this impacted me," and having carriers like Ari Garrison say, "Hey, we love this program and we love this meeting because of the experiences that people like that they get on Capitol Hill." And we had one meeting that Rose actually attended was with a Congressman, Mike Collins, and he actually owns a carrier and is a trucking company as well. So, and hearing his support for a driver, he says that he's a trucker himself and he advocates for the industry, and you see that, and the driver sees that, and it makes you it all just comes full circle, right?
I love that. And how the Driver of the Year award recognizes top tier professional drivers, but not only recognizes them, but amplifies their voice, gives them opportunity to tell their story. And just that authentic one-on-one conversations about what the best of the best drivers are seeing out there, that's incredibly impactful for those making the decisions on Capitol Hill. But what I also hear is the reciprocal impact back to the drivers, that they're feeling seen, heard, understood, and valued. And at the end of the day, no matter what our jobs are in the world, could we say that everyone wants to be seen, heard, and valued for not only the work they do, but for who they are? And this Driver of the Year award and this opportunity for the drivers to go and do what Rose did, and for fleets to see that full circle, like, there's nothing like amplifying their voice and seeing them recognized for what they're doing. And for me, it shows the incredible work that our fleets are doing in the nation, as well as the incredible work that our drivers and just the support people in the industry. It's just an incredible industry filled with people who care and who are making a difference. So when we think about the human element, what's the most surprising reaction that you've gotten from a member of Congress or a policymaker when you've been talking about trucking issues?
Yeah. This is like kind of like a funny story, but my first call in Washington, I had the Tennessee group, right? And we actually had a member meeting, an in-person meeting with Congressman Steve Cohen out of Memphis, right? And we talked truck parking, we talked about hair follicle testing, and he just stops at hair follicle testing and he just comes. So there was a guy from the Mets who was on LSD and did a no-hitter, or pitched a no-hitter. Something so random, not trucking related at all whatsoever, right? He's been on House TNI for, at the time, like 17, 15 years, right? And I'm just looking at this guy. I am so new to the industry. I am 3 months in, and I am just, whoa. And, we brought it back to truck parking, and he's like, well, what do you want? More so talked about this picture from years ago on drugs. I kid you not, the next week, he is a co-sponsor for truck parking with, our carrier members in the room. And we talked trucking issues, of course, but I think maybe it was the connection that he had when we talked about that human side. It was just a surprising way to see the support he had for the industry and not even talking it was just such a bizarre circumstance. But ever since, he's been co-sponsoring for this bill for both, the 118th Congress and the 119th Congress. So he's coming back and supporting that bill. He's supporting truck parking. And I had a meeting with his staff and I tell him the story. I was like, we talked trucking, but he wanted to talk about this. But at the end of the day, he still supported us and he understands and he's hearing it. So yeah, that was like such a surprising time. It was so bizarre, but it was so awesome. So, his chief of staff, she was like, I have to tell my boss this. He's going to find this hysterical. And he's always been a ally for the trucking industry. So it's always nice having him in our corner as well.
Well, and that kind of connects back to what we were just talking about with the Driver of the Year award and the drivers feeling seen and heard and recognized and valued. Mm-hmm. These conversations that you're having with the congressman on Capitol Hill, they're hearing all kinds of things about many different things in one window of time. And that was what was in the front of his brain in the moment that you happened to be face to face with him. But the reality is you demonstrated the same thing. You saw, you listened, you empathized, you heard. And also in that moment, he also heard what you were talking about and then became an advocate. And there is just, I love technology. I love AI tools. They're valuable. They help us do our work better and faster in many ways. But at the end of the day, it is these human connections that are our superpower. And that's what I hear in the Driver of the Year award. And I hear in just this call on Congress, and that what was an absurd conversation, but yet you walked away with unexpectedly with an ally and someone that human to human connection, people who really care, making a difference for our drivers, for our communities, improving safety and improving the driver experience. So I love that. So as we wrap up here, we're going to make a pivot. This is human connection, but there's a little fun with this human connection. So I work long hours and, most of the people I know work long hours. And so we have a special go-to beverage or maybe caffeine or something like that. So what is I would think and empathize that you might too have a favorite coffee beverage. So what's your go-to coffee order before a long day of Capitol Hill meetings, Hailey?
Yeah. I feel it's like a long day in general. So I'm a mom of two. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, but the go-to for work or just recuperating as a mom, I am a big lover of like the shaken espressos at Starbucks. I like tasting the coffee from time to time, but also getting a little sweetness, and I add a little oat milk. And that's kind of where I go. Now, sometimes I'll like kind of pivot and just get like something so sweet and doesn't taste like coffee, and you're like, what are you doing? But also that sugar rush, or this is kind of like the pick me up. This is my way of treating myself before work or during work. And it's been fun. And then, there's actually a Dunkin' Donuts under in the underground tunnels on the house side in Capitol Hill. So sometimes it's like, all right, what are we getting now? And so it's good pick up. I will say that. Quickly iced
Yes.
coffee or something.
And I love that you connected. You're like, hey, not only do I make these calls on Capitol Hill, but like also I'm a mom of these young children. And what prompted my coffee conversation is my daughter's an RN. She's healthcare like her dad. And one of my favorite cups that she has, and I think my daughter-in-law has a version of this coffee cup as well. It's like the coffee is required today's objective is to keep the tiny humans alive.
Yes.
And there are just days like that. And then on other days, it's like keeping the mamas and the daddies alive.
Yes. Yes. It
So
is
just
very
that little
much
jolt of caffeine and sugar. Yes, a little comfort from the sugar and cream. I love it.
Exactly.
So if trucking, mascots are fun, mascots are memorable. And so if trucking had a mascot in Washington, what would it be? Would it maybe be a bulldog, a bald eagle, or maybe a Mack truck with a briefcase? What do you think?
So my first thought is that I am originally from the Philadelphia area, and we have the most bizarre looking mascots. If you ever seen them, or if you don't know what they look like, you can look up the Philly Fanatic or Gritty from the Flyers. And I would love to say that trucking is that. But I go back to, what does trucking represent? And I would say something strong, like a Clydesdale, like a large horse of sorts, right? And you have the history behind horses in transportation. At one point they were the only way for goods to be brought over. And, we're just a force to be reckoned with. We are always needed, just like how the horse was always needed, right? So I think trucking can go back to just being a big old Clydesdale, a big horse. That's how I think. But I also am just thinking, oh my gosh, I want something funny like whatever the Philadelphia sports teams have at the same time. So.
Oh, I love that. And it needs to be animated and it needs to be fun. And I am passionate about all things transportation. I got a love for cars from my dad. And I have 2 Tennessee walking horses. I love to drive the tractor on the ranch. And so I am voting with you on the horse mascot. That's way better than the 3 that I offered to the table. I'm like, yes. So, and just their storied past in trucking as well. So they're my plan. If everything goes crazy, I still have transportation. So, but hopefully not. And trucking, everything keeps still coming on a truck. Hailey, I want to thank you for your time today. I'm so happy that you went on that family vacation. You got that notebook full of great information from family trucking professionals that then propelled you to be a voice on Capitol Hill. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the work that your team does. And we appreciate you so much. And I look forward to seeing you and the team and the other influencers in our industry at Call on Washington.
Thank you for having me, Ginger. When you asked me to do this, I was first I was very nervous, and then I was like, but the excitement was still there. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for letting me talk about trucking and, where my background came from all the way from the beginning. But, we talked about so much about we're being able to tell a trucking story and, Colin Washington. Yeah, thank you for just letting us, talk about it and see where things go. Hopefully we get some more people registered. So if you're hearing, please
and that
make your
brings me, that's
registrations.
exactly where I was going. Where can people connect with you, Hailey, and where can they participate in the work that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so you can call me. I can give you my phone number, or you can email me at hbetham@truckload.org. I can even find our membership manager. Her name is Erica, can gladly support and give you all of the information. She actually is brand new. But in terms of getting involved in TCA, it's always through our membership, right? And, if you're already a TCA member, just go on our TCA website and sign on up and have a good day on Capitol Hill and, just talk trucking.
That's right. And make a difference in the lives of others. Well,
Yes.
Thank you so much, Hailey. And we appreciate you so much.
Thanks, Ginger. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us today. Our goal with the Hire Truckers podcast is to provide industry insights, marketing trends, and motivation to level up your recruiting game. If we added value, take a few seconds to share this with your network. Have a great week.